Everybody, welcome to your ABU lunchtime learning session, and it's wonderful to have you here, and it's especially wonderful today to have Susan Payton with us. So Susan, hi and welcome to ABU. I know you're a member of ABU, a long-time member of ABU, and you have just, well, in the last couple of months, published your book, The Business of Stories. And today you're going to talk about exactly that, which is what all of us need to know about, the business of stories. So just to introduce you, you are a story lover from childhood, like me, probably like many of us, but you went to work in the media. You wrote press releases for and research stories for things like Chris Tarrant's breakfast show at Capital Radio, all sorts of really interesting ways. I think storytellers often have a very interesting and mixed kind of bio. And then you were an events organizer. You talk about the thrill of inviting people into the story that was happening around them, which is a lovely way of kind of describing events. And then you became a story brand certified guide, and now you've kind of gone out on your own and published your own book, which is called The Business of Stories. So tell us kind of what happened in between all those CV events and how it's been for you. The Business of Stories. It's, yes, lovely book.
Yeah, it's funny because I mean I never thought of myself as a storyteller. It was in retrospect, it was looking back when I realized that storytelling was my thing, that I saw that golden thread that was there, and that actually a big part of what I'd been doing throughout my career is storytelling, including the events and including all the research. And literally on the Chris Tarrant breakfast show, I used to write the funny little stories that he used to read out and, you know, find funny stories from around the world. So, and, you know, English was my favorite subject at school. I loved reading stories to my kids, you know. Both of my girls got to a point where they were like, Mum, really, we want to read our own books now. And I was like, oh, really?
Yes, no, yes, I completely empathize with that. I love reading stories. It's great to have grandchildren to start again with.
Yes, no, I haven't got there yet, but
no, you're far too young.
I look forward to that. And then it wasn't really until it was 2015 when I was building a community of women in business, and I knew that I wanted to create a community, and I knew that with all the things I'd done, with my background, with my experience, that there would be something that I could offer them. You know, there would be something that would come out of it by asking them what they needed and just, you know, listening to people. I thought, I will find my value, I'll find my thing, because I didn't really know what it was at that point. So I literally just was building this community. I was having, you know, guest speakers. I was getting resources for women who were starting their own business. The group got to about 1,500 people. I was, you know, all sorts of very active. I mean, this, you know, Facebook groups weren't a massive thing back in 2000.
No, that's really
now we're all in hundreds of them. But back then, it really wasn't. In fact, I was paying somebody a lot of money to build me a forum on my website, you know, just as really people were starting to switch over and use Facebook groups. So of course, nobody ever logged into my forum. They just said, can't we just talk to you in the group? So but it was out of that I realized that what people were really struggling with was knowing how to talk about them in a way that would resonate with the people that they wanted to attract into their business. And I would have calls with people in the group, and I'd say, well, tell me your story, tell me all about you. And they'd tell me their story. And it would be fascinating because everybody's story is fascinating, and, you know, what led them here and why they were doing what they do. And then I would say, none of that's on your website. And like, nobody would know any of that about you. But that makes me feel like I want to work with you. But so you're missing a massive opportunity there by not, you know, telling that story. so I was talking in the group about, make sure you're all telling your story. And then I thought, well, I better, go into the group and tell mine. So I did. I told my story. And at that point, I've been a single mum for quite a few years. I just talked about the ups and downs. I'd had ME for a few years. So I just talked about that struggle, a single parent, building your business, and just having to overcome all the challenges that come with that. And the response that I got in the group just absolutely blew me away. Not because I had some humdinger of a, Hollywood blockbuster story, but because I had an everyday story of, the kind of experiences that we can all relate to, the times when it's tough, the times when you feel a bit lost or out of your depth, or, the times that you're struggling and what keeps you going and what's, And
then I think it's so, people, when they're writing their books, people don't always understand that it's not the story about how brilliant you are and how well you've done and how much money you've made that really engages people. It's exactly the opposite.
Yes. Yeah, exactly the opposite. And the other thing sometimes people think is, well, I haven't got a story because I've never been homeless or penniless or had a near-death experience, or, I haven't got some rag to riches, story. But I always remind people that they're not the stories people can relate to, because they haven't got that story either. The stories they'll relate to are the stories that are like their story, where they just
such a good
feel,
point.
Yeah. And if stories are there to connect and resonate and for people to, relate to them, then they're going to relate to the stories that are relatable. So actually, it's the everyday stories of, and you see it on LinkedIn all the time, the posts that get traction is somebody just saying, I'm really struggling today. Or, I literally posted one yesterday about a post that I'd seen that had really made me laugh, like proper belly laugh, tears coming down my eyes, coming down my face. And it actually lifted my spirit. And I thought, do you know what? I'm going to go out for a walk. And I went for a walk with the dog and I was chuckling the whole way around. And I came back and I just did a post saying, sometimes that's what we just need, something funny or, something that just feels good. Maybe it's some music to just remind us that actually life's about fun and life's about, enjoying the sunshine and walking your dog and all of those things. And it got loads and loads of traction, and that's all I was talking about. But people can relate to that, and people were like, oh, thank you for the reminder. And
so you talk about storytelling being a superpower in business.
Yeah.
So would you say that a story like that is building your business? What is how do you use it as a superpower?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I told my story in the group and I got that response, I thought, and literally when I say I got good response, I mean, yes, people were messaging me saying, oh my God, I really resonate with your story. Here's a bit of my story. Here's where my story is similar to yours. So that was really interesting. And that made me realize that stories are a two-way thing. It's not a one-way thing. You think you're telling your story, but actually people are relating it to their story. It's making them think about their story. So it's a co-creation. It's a two-way thing. So it made me realize that. But also people were literally emailing me saying, so how can we work with you? And, what's the coaching that you do? And I thought, wow, people who've been in my group for months and, a bit of engagement, but, really ignored all my posts about, do you want me to coach you? Suddenly were saying, and all I'd done was tell my story. Wow. That is all I'd done.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And there's loads of examples in the book. I talk about when I was in a market one time and there was a stall with some beautiful products on. And as I literally stopped and was just looking at something, the young couple told me their story and why they were doing what they do. And their little sign on the table was, it only takes a moment to create a moment. And they told me the story behind that. And I bought something from the stall. There's no way I wasn't, I got so wrapped up in their story and how it made me feel. that I ended up buying something. I came back home, I went on their website and had a look. I bought something on the website. I wrote a blog about it. I've written about it in my book.
Wow.
All they did differently that day than every other marketplace in that, every other person in that market, was they told me a story. So
fantastic.
Story is so powerful. And so, yes, there are the little posts, there are the little, little snippets every day that just help to get across who you are, what you're about. They say people work with people, buy from people, obviously. And everyone talks about this know, like, and trust. Well, we've got to be doing things to tick those boxes. We've got to do things so that people can get the feeling, okay, do I like this person? Is this someone that I feel that I could work with? Do I feel like they get me? Do I trust them to help me solve this problem? And that by far the most powerful way to tick those boxes is to be telling stories, not just your story, customer stories, transformations that you help people achieve, your business story, what you're about, what it stands for, why it exists, the problem it solves, and the person you're speaking to, their story. This is how I get you. This is, I've been where you are now. This is how I felt. So I get how you're feeling. And I get that journey ahead of you looks scary, but here's what I did, and here's how I got out the other side. And if that's something that, you want me to help you with, I can. So we can use storytelling in so many ways. And it also means we don't have to sit there and worry about producing some high converting sales page or come up with some super duper, sales funnel, or, I hate all those terms, hooks and tripwires and, all those kind of marketing tactics.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. If we just actually tell stories, we'll attract the people that actually connect with us and feel like we would get them, which is why I say people will show up already knowing that they want to work with you. And I get this all the time. People say, I've been following you, I've read your posts, I love that story when you talked about walking across M&S with your boob out by mistake.
Sounds like a good one.
Yeah. Or whatever story it was that I told that particularly, and it'll be enough to actually make them, take action. I get DMs from people on LinkedIn all the time, just saying, that story you told about that time when you were, crying into your glass of wine because you realized you didn't have a business, that was me.
That's great. So interesting, because I think, as you say, we often think that the way we make decisions business wise, especially when we're, kind of spending money, signing up to something, is very rational. And, it's sort of, is it cost effective? Will it bring in more business to me? But actually, you're so right that actually all those decisions are always emotional. And when we're convinced by a story, it's about how we feel. Yes. And then we feel that we want to work with that person, because, and also it's a very good way of qualifying clients, because if they don't like your story, you don't want to work with them either. So it's a good way of kind of getting the response you want. Lee Molam is here, and she says stories are so memorable, and that's what's so amazing about Susan's and the storytelling approach to business. So yes, thanks.
And it's so much easier, because it's authentic. It's your stories. It's you're not trying to, yes, of course there's some guidance, there's some rules around storytelling as such. It's not dumping, it's not just telling stories for the sake of it. It's sometimes I say to people, it's not therapy, it's not for you to just
no, that's very true,
get everything off your chest. You want to be intentional about it. You want to be strategic about it. And by that, I mean, thinking about, okay, who am I speaking to? And where are they? What's their story? What's going on for them?
Yeah.
Where are they? And how can I show that I get them? So what stories have I got that they are going to resonate with, and they are going to relate to, and they are going to, you know, and that connection can be formed. I'm running a group coaching program at the moment, and we've just got to the point where they've unpacked their personal story, they've unpacked their business story, they've unpacked their customer story, and we're just starting to go, okay, what's the link, what's the connections, what stories, you know, how do we bring all of these together? And the connection's always there, you know. Yeah. Even when people say to me, oh, I've got 4 different audiences, you know, how on earth can I know which stories to tell? There's always a common theme, because they are all coming to you for what you do. So there is a link, there's a golden thread. And once you find that, or, you know, I've got that, I call it the sweet spot in the middle of, you know, the process that I take people, takes them to the sweet spot in the middle. Once you're there, then you know what stories to tell, you know, and you know what's going to resonate. And you can pretty much, you know, you can talk about anything you want to talk about, but it's knowing how to make it relevant, how to bring it back to what you do, and, you know, how you help people get past the, you know, get unstuck or get past the challenge that they're facing right now. Yeah. But when you use storytelling, it just feels so much more, what's the word? You know, it never feels false. It never feels.
No, it doesn't feel like selling, does it?
No, exactly.
It's relating. Exactly. So you've said, so the 3 key stories perhaps are your personal story, your business's story, and your customer or client story, or probably lots of those. So what about the actual technique? Is there a way that you need to tell every story, however short or long it is? Are there steps you need to follow?
There's lots of different ways. I mean, there's a couple of tips. Our first one is the very first sentence, I always think, is going to make or break a story, because if people aren't grabbed very, very quickly, and what I see a lot, so in my masterclass, when I'm talking about the personal story, I get everybody to think of a defining moment. You know, think of a defining moment. You'll have had loads, but think of one defining moment on this journey that you've been on, that even at the time you probably didn't even realize it was a defining moment, but when you look back. So for me, you know, telling my story in my group was a very significant defining moment. It completely changed my business and it changed my life. I wouldn't be here now with this book talking to you if I hadn't told that story, decided to tell that story, even though at the time I felt quite panicky about it. You know, I felt very vulnerable. I didn't know how it would be taken. I didn't know if anybody cared. Did anybody want to hear my story? You know, I had all of those concerns going through my head, but it was the best thing I ever did. So that was a defining moment for me. So then I get somebody to tell me their defining moment, and inevitably what they do is they start filling in the background. Well, you know, I'd been doing this and I've been working, and you know, so they take a few minutes to fill in the background, and then they'll tell me what happened, and then they'll tell me what happened afterwards and as a result and everything else. So but then I say to them, what's the exact moment? Okay. And actually Joe came on one recently, and he very kindly offered to tell his defining moment. So he told us, you know, gave us a bit of the run up to it, told us what happened afterwards. So I said, what was the exact moment? And he said, well, you know, I literally just realized one day, you know, I was getting ready for work, and I just realized that I wasn't enjoying my work anymore, and you know, I wasn't happy, and it wasn't, something had to change. So I said, well, how about if you started the story with, you know, I woke up one morning and realized that I'd created a job and a life that was no longer making me happy. Start there, right in the moment, you know. I always say, where does a James Bond film start?
Yes.
Okay. He's running across the rooftops being shot at. There's no filling in the background first, you know, straight into the action. So start in the moment, you know. I always stop and think. I might write a story out first, but then I'll always go back and think, right, how can I do a real nice, short, impactful first sentence to grab them? So start in the moment. And And then a very nice little kind of template people can use is somebody wanted, but so then. So somebody who's the story about, wanted, what did you want? What, you know, what was it that you really, really wanted, but you just didn't know how to get it? You know, the but is, so what was the problem? What was stopping you from having it? What was, you know, somebody wanted, but so what happened? What did you do? What was the call to action? What adventure did you go on? What journey did you go on? You know, what did you do? And but so then what happened? How did, you know, what changed? What was the transformation? What difference did it make? So that's a really nice little structure that you can follow. Whether your story is 30 seconds long or 30 minutes long, you can use that as a very nice structure. But really, it's, you know, have a really strong start, a strong finish.
Yeah.
And
jump into the action.
Jump into the action.
Story till later if you need it.
I often say to people, write the story out that you want to tell and then throw away the first third of it.
Yeah.
Because you've probably just got to the bit that, you know, we really, really want to hear. And the other thing I would say is please don't be frightened of putting a call to action at the end.
Right.
You know, people, and people say, oh, but it, you know, it'll break, you know, it'll feel salesy, or people will feel like, you know, I've switched from storytelling to selling. And I actually wrote an email about this the other day, and I said, if you have just taken somebody on a journey with your story and they've really connected with it, and they're feeling something because you've taken them back to, you know, or you've gone back to that time when you were where they are, and you've talked about how you were feeling, which has made them, you know, reminded them of how they're feeling. So they've connected with you. They've read your story. They've read about how you overcame that challenge, and that's given them hope. That's made them think, maybe I can overcome this too, you know, and you've talked about the difference that it made. And, you know, so you've kind of brought them out the other side, and then you just go. You just disappear. You just end the post. You just leave them hanging. You don't offer to show them how to, you know, go on this journey themselves if they want to. And I spend a lot of time reframing that in people's head is, you know, you're not selling. Think of it as serving. Think of it as, you know, if this is a journey that, you know, if you're stuck where I was and you want me to show you how to get through and get out the other side of this, you know, then here's how I can help you. If they don't want the help, they'll just move on. But if they do want the help, don't leave them hanging there wondering, you know, moving on to the next post thinking, oh, well, you know, our journey ends there.
Yeah. So is that, do you need to weave your call to action at the end into the story? Is it the final line of the story, or do you just put, you know, if you want to know more, contact me at, you can do either. But if, you know, if you don't know how to weave it in, or if it doesn't feel easy to weave it in, then just finish with a PS, you know. And actually, that's exactly what I did on the email that I wrote. Don't leave people hanging. And then I signed off, and then I put PS, by the way, I'm not leaving you hanging. You know, if you want help, here's what to do. Right.
But yeah, you can either keep it as a standalone thing at the end, but you want to make it obvious. We're not trying to hide it in the story and go, oh, I hope people don't notice that I've put a call to action in here. We want to say, hey, you know, I can help you with this if that's what you want.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. So yes, so is that how stories can do all the hard work? Is that your yes. kind of, you know, your yes. ultimate so do you do any other kind of selling yourself apart from telling stories?
Yeah.
Or is that it? I mean, do you intersperse it with salesy non-story stuff, or just simply tell stories?
I tend to weave storytelling into everything I do. And actually, the more you do it, the easier that becomes and the more natural it becomes. I was talking to my group yesterday about sales conversations, because that's the other thing, is you get somebody onto a call and, you know, people often approach a sales conversation thinking they're there to pitch, they're there to, you know, tell somebody what I do, tell them how much it costs, you know, see if they want to buy it. I completely come at it from the other way. And I spend 80% of the call unpacking their story, and asking them, where they're at and where they want to go, what's the goal, what's the vision for the business, and what's the journey look like, and so what's the challenge that you've got right now, what's the problem, what's holding you back, how do you want it to be, how do you want this journey to go? And if that is something, if the challenge they've got is something that I know that I can help them with, and that I can make a difference, then I tell them what I do, but I relate it back to what they just told me they want. So I'll make it personal, I'll make it about the exact, the goal, the vision, the journey that they're on. I'll use storytelling to talk about what I do. I might give them an example of a client that was very similar situation, and how I help them, and what the transformation that they get. So I weave storytelling into everything, whether it's so I recently did a launch for my group program, and I did an email every day for a couple of weeks. And, sometimes the story was literally the first paragraph, and that was it. And then I started talking about the program. Other ones, the whole email was a story. Because don't forget, a story could be a couple of sentences. It doesn't have to be every story doesn't have to be a huge lump of text. It could be a couple of sentences in there. But yeah, I pretty much approach everything now with my storytelling hat on, because it never feels salesy that way. And I find that the people now that come to me, the people now that book a call with me, the people now that have come onto my program, are such a good fit for me, because if they like my stuff and it really spoke to them, or they've listened to me, or they've been on a masterclass or something, and they just really like my approach, or they've read my book, then they're a very good fit. So it just makes it all very easy. Absolutely. And feel very natural, and doesn't ever feel awkward or forced or salesy. I don't have to do telling people that they've got to make a decision on the call, or they've got to I'm not following some script to overcome their objections. I just tell stories.
Yeah, absolutely. So lots of very positive comments here. Danny says great talk and advice, and Lee says this is such brilliant technique and advice. MJ and Mary Jane, very positive. Michaela said I think often the best stories are about the most banal things. But Lee Molam has a question. She says, as an introvert, any advice to get more comfortable and confident telling your story? It feels quite vulnerable, especially in a business context.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. It's I've got a couple of people in the program at the moment that are the same. And I always say, you can start very small. You don't have to write your core, origin story and put it out there. You could start really small. And never share anything you're not comfortable with sharing. Like, this isn't about you've got to tell everybody your deepest, darkest secrets. It's not that at all. If you've been through something that your ideal client is going through right now, there's even ways of talking about that without you having to give the specifics of what happened to you. You can just relate to that feeling. You can just say, I've been where you are now, and I know what it feels like to feel lost or frustrated, or whatever the feelings are. But one of the things I got them to do in my group last week was just to do a post and just to put 10 bullet points, just 10 things about me. Some of them did touch on some of the struggles and the challenges. Others kept it very positive. And, I've done Ironman, and I've, swam in shark infested waters, and but it's just starting to give people a flavor and essence of who you are. One of the things that I hear in marketing quite a lot is, nobody cares about your story. Nobody cares about you. It's all about them. It's got to be about them. Tell their story. Don't tell your story. And even, I'm a story brand guide, and story brand is very much about tell the customer story, which is important. You absolutely can't all be about you. That wouldn't work either. There definitely has to be the right balance. But the problem with only talking about the customer is, how do they choose who they want to work with if they're not getting anything, if they've got no idea what you're like, so you just want to be giving people, a flavor of, for some people it's more about, this is, I know somebody that most of her social media is about her cats, because she's cat mad, but she actually attracts people that go, I love your cats, so it doesn't have to be, anything that you don't want to share. It shouldn't be anything that you don't want to share. So, but maybe just get comfortable with it slowly, share some little things and just see, when you start seeing the engagement that you get, when you start seeing how much people appreciate, I couldn't believe how many comments I got on my thing yesterday about laughing at a post, and how many people just said, thank you for the reminder, or, you're right. Yeah. It's so important that we remember to laugh and to have fun, and all of these things. So if you talk about stuff that's meaningful to you, that's important to you, then you'll attract the people that connects with too. You could talk about being an introvert and how much actually you struggle with seeing people on social media who are all over it and videos and so highly visible. Yeah. And actually that's something you struggle with. You'll attract people who resonate with that.
Absolutely. And so many people are in that position. So
absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Do you think there are also people who struggle with video? Do you think what do you think is, is there a better or worse way to communicate your stories? Do you put up a post where you write your story? Do you do a video with you telling your story? What do you think? What do you get the most traction from?
I think, studies show that video is, the most powerful way. Personally, I'm a writer and I'm in my happy place writing. I have recently more and more been adding an image of me to my posts, because you can tell the story with imagery, and people can read the post and then they can see you and then they can start to, get a sense of who you are. I'm not a big, I don't do much video on social media, but I do a lot of this kind of stuff, and I do masterclasses and I do free, I do lives and I turn up in people's groups. So because I do think it's important for people to be able to see you. So if you are comfortable with doing that, then I would always encourage you to do it. But again, you need to do what you're comfortable with doing. And I, certainly on things like LinkedIn, for me, it's always writing. I always write posts. It's something I probably need to do more, is videos, but I just feel the most comfortable is something like this, I can just chat all day. Whereas the minute me and a camera, I suddenly kind of think, oh, I don't know.
even talking to your own screen.
Yeah, it's a bit weird, but there's so many, and social media is changing so fast, and stories and reels and TikTok and but if you haven't got the time to keep up with all of that stuff, which I don't particularly, and there's some great things on TikTok, but you wonder how long that actually took them to make that 30-second clip. Probably
absolutely
would take me all day, and is that the best use of my time? Probably right now it's not. So it needs to, and it's also where your audience is, what your audience likes, how you're going to connect with them. But if you're uncomfortable with video, then you got to do what you're really comfortable with. And I think, in terms of, is one better than the other in terms of storytelling? No, because we all love a good book, we all love a good film. So I think the key is to make the story compelling and simple. Don't overcomplicate. Most people put way too much stuff into the story. You know, I've had people in the group say, I'm going to post this story, you know, give any feedback. And I say, yeah, there's 5 stories in there. Like, just pick one, you know, so keep it simple. Yeah, I don't think there's any such thing as too many stories. That's another thing I get asked. I don't think there's such a thing as too many stories. There's boring stories, or not boring stories. There's stories told in a boring way.
Yeah.
Yes. And then it's, you know, or people say to me, how long should it be? And I say, well, if it's boring, then, you know, 1 paragraph's too long. So you can tell any story, but what you need to practice is just telling it in a way that's engaging. Make it relevant, keep it simple.
So if you're going to write a little story, even for a social media post, should you write it and edit it and get it right before you post it? Is that quite important? Or should you just go out there and put it out there and see if it works?
Yeah, I think probably somewhere in the middle, you know. I think don't get stuck in perfectionism.
No.
Definitely not. But I would, you know, it kind of goes back to what I said before about, you do need to think it through. You do need to be a bit intentional about it. And I, you know, if people go through the process in my book, really that's what I'm showing them how to do, is how to choose the stories. And then there's a chapter on how to craft them. There's a chapter on how to share them. Because, you know, we want to think about it. And yes, so I tend to, you know, kind of get what I want to say out of my head. Then I'll spend a bit of time shaping it, making sure I'm grabbing them, making sure I'm kind of close the story loop, or, you know, end it with a nice call to action. Take out any clutter, anything that doesn't need to be there. You know, people's time is precious. That, you know, just any details that don't need to be there, take them out. But one thing I did only find out a few days ago that apparently is quite important is, once you've posted a post, don't go back and edit it, because apparently if you go back in and edit, it dramatically reduces your reach.
That's interesting. Is that like LinkedIn and Facebook, or
it was on LinkedIn that I saw the post, and there was hundreds of comments underneath saying, yes, absolutely true, we've tested it and it's completely true.
Wow.
So I now check and double check, and I don't hit you know, publish until it's ready, and then I don't go back in and edit.
Right. That's a very good piece of advice.
Yes. I literally only just found that out, and I was terrible for posting something and then reading it, thinking, oh no, I'll go back in and
I notice a bit of mispunctuation in my post, exactly, and I'll go in and correct it.
Especially when you're a writer, you're like, oh, I can't let that go.
Yeah. So write it properly first, and then
write it properly first. But don't spend hours over it, you know.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, Michaela's just said something that I totally resonate with. She says, I actually prefer reading posts to watching videos. I can skim it to see if I want to give it my time, whereas some videos, I think I don't have time for this. And I completely agree, especially if they're longer than a couple of minutes. I'll go, no, absolutely. I haven't got time for that. But what happens to me is, if I start watching a video or the captions come up, because it's words, I am kind of hooked on it, and I can't go on watching to see the words cut, you know, where the story ends in words, which is bad. I mean, that's just a kind of mad thing of mine, but it's quite interesting.
No, I think you're right. I think I'm the same. In fact, I even have the subtitles on when I'm watching telly.
Yes.
And I read.
yes, absolutely. No, it's really interesting what actually engages your brain. So maybe sort of write the post, also record it as a video and put them together. Maybe that's the ultimate way to get people the maximum people to engage.
It's a good idea.
Well, Susan, I know you've got to go on to another group, and just thank you so much for your time. This has been really, really enlightening and inspiring, and a wonderful story of you and your story and your book, which we'll put the link, of course, in the comments. And
Lovely, thank
just
you.
thank you so much. The Business of Stories is Susan's book, and I think she's just given us a wonderful masterclass on the business of stories. So thank
Oh, you're
you
welcome.
so
As
much
always,
for that.
I could talk about stories all day long. Well, I do, so.
That's what you do, yes. Perfect.
Yes, thank you for inviting me, Lucy.
Thank you, Susan, and talk to you soon.
Yes, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.